the XRP Ledger is showing itself from the best side, in my opinion, on all of these fronts. So it's all about positioning yourself, right? That's how I see it. And we are positioning ourselves very great. And when the time comes where there's like more liquidity in the market, this will be also reflected in XRP and of course also the XRP Ledger. So I'm very, very bullish in what we have done on the back end, so to speak, to position ourselves.
We need to talk about the centralized exchange order books, but also on the decentralized exchange order books and the AMM, for example. And I want to say this very clearly. XRP is a coin with the utility of being liquid all the time. You want XRP to be very liquid. That's why AMMs and all these single asset vaults and all these DeFi mechanics are so important, because they make XRP available, tradable, which is exactly what all these big companies and institutions need. They want thick order books, not thin. Hey and welcome to Krippenreiter TV, our weekly series on Monday, hosted by me, Krippenreiter, and my regular co-host Vet. 1 year has passed and a new year begins. The XRPL continues to close ledgers as always, and XRP is still the #1 digital neutral asset on the blockchain. In 2026, Vet and I will continue to keep an eye on how the XRPL develops and discuss the dramas and topics that are being discussed in the community. In the upcoming minutes, I will ask Vet about the exchange supply shock topic and why we should remain hopeful even though XRP didn't yet hit all-time highs or numbers on the DEX. Hi Vet, do you have a good new year? Everything fine?
Yeah, Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year to you. Hope you had a great New Year's Eve and the start into 2026. It's very exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. And one exciting topic, especially in the beginning of this year, was the exchange supply shock topic. It was it was a topic that was heavily discussed with a lot of drama, a lot of opinions, and some of them more subjective than objective. And the basis for all of this was this one picture that Glassnode was putting out, and many influencers and many accounts shared this and tried to explain why XRP on all these exchanges will have a supply shock. And what we have to realize is that the title actually was XRP Balance on Exchanges Total, all exchanges. And then we found out that Glassnode is not really following all the exchanges. They were just following like 10 exchanges, and Binance was missing, and Upbit was missing. And what the green line is saying, that the balance is basically down to 1.6 billion, when in reality the real number is 16 billion or close to 16 billion. And I think the reasoning for this is people misunderstanding the difference between reserves and user funds and what exchanges are really doing. What is their use case and why are they here? And then people are also missing or misunderstanding the fact that your OTC and dark pools is always also another topic. Like, you cannot mix these topics up. You have all these different topics that you have to discuss and that you have to argue against or in favor. But if you say supply shock is incoming because of this overview, I think you are misunderstanding the greater topic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was, in my opinion, a very clear case of people just not reading properly, and not complete data, basically, as you have to say, described. You see that the top left corner very clearly how it is defined. It says, hey, this is total balance. This is the XRP balance on exchanges, okay? All XRP on exchanges. And that is simply not true, that we have only, I think, 1.7 billion it is showing.
The real number is...
so it was showing like a drop or something like this between 1.7 or 3.7 billion, something like that. But the real number is closer to 16 billion. Fair to say between 15 and 16, depending on where you look. But there are major exchanges out there. You have Upbit, who alone has like 6 billion in funds. Those are, by the way, user funds. An exchange is like in the business of facilitating service to their customers and holding their assets for this purpose. They are not in the business of holding the assets themselves. So the idea of saying, this is total exchange, but how much does the user hold, right? That is a good question, but the thing is, it's just a tiny amount. You have a great picture that you can show as well about Kraken, for example, how they deal with that and explain that. But majority, or basically 99.999% of the funds, right, is user funds. Okay, these are users, and it's maybe staggering for people to hear. Yeah, 6 billion up it, but yeah, South Korea has a huge XRP community. You have Binance, you have like Asia, you have like the whole community as one loves exchanges. They have a lot of XRP on exchanges, and that XRP is readily available to them. Okay, some people just don't like to do self custody. They rather custody with an exchange. They trust them. They hold them. They have their price targets, and they will move the funds once they trigger. You don't know which targets they are. But fact of the matter is that the data was just completely inaccurate. So by a good amount of like 10x, right? If you say 1.57 billion, yeah, it's actually 15 plus billion out there.
But the argument, the criticism was also that these funds are basically idle. So people are. So the argument was that as soon as the price reaches a certain higher price target, this is when people will actually start selling. And to me, this is like only like there are two sides on a coin. One side is when the price is high, people will sell, but people will also sell, like market makers. They will always sell all the time because they are not in for higher or lower prices. They are in for trading volume. They make money for trading volume. And then you have people that maybe expect a crash at some point, and they will also sell if the price is lower. If the price at a certain point, let's say the price is lower than $1.60, they will sell because they expect the price to go even lower. And to protect themselves against these crashes, they are in favor, or they will adjust the portfolio and sell a certain amount. And this will also make people trade on the exchange. It's not like all these funds are sitting there idle on the exchange and only half of it will ever be used. It's probably more realistic to think that a lot of the funds that are sitting there could be used at any given point. They are maybe not like liquid right now, because maybe right now people are not willing to sell or to trade as much as they used to. But as soon as the volume ticks up, and as soon as the sentiment shifts, maybe you will see that a lot more of these funds are being traded more actively. But they're still there.
Exactly, 100%. And people can see this live. Also, they have the feel for this. That there are some dynamics in play here, which, by the way, I want to highlight. This is a completely different discussion, but it's a good one to have because that's what people came up with as a response, which, by the way, has nothing to do with it. So when we talk about the total XRP debate, this is what Glassnode is claiming, right? And what these news outlets were posting, right? And me, you, others corrected the data. That was directed to this, okay, specifically. Right. You cannot say your data is wrong because you don't know like how much is an order book. This is a completely different discussion. Right. Like order book liquidity is different. They themselves don't talk about order book liquidity. We can see what they talk about. They talk about balance on exchanges total. So this is the debate. So please, for the people who were very critical about this. Let's be very clear what this is about and what they have claimed here. But good that you mentioned what they were bringing up is the order book liquidity. And some people have like a good feel for this. And you mentioned it's available and people can move it whenever they want. Sometimes you have the case where there's nothing going on, right? Nothing is going on, and the price is moving up, right? You don't know what the catalyst is. Well, people are not selling. The order books are very thin, and so the buy orders just eat them up, and price goes up. Right. In my opinion, last year was okay, not last year now because in 2026, but in 2024, in October, November, it was like this. There was no real catalyst, and suddenly XRP went up, and because nobody was selling, and the order books were thin, and people didn't want to sell. And then you have the situation where we are right now, we have ETFs, right? We have ETFs, we have inflows. We showed last time, right? You showed like perfectly how much is accumulated, close to 1% in supplies already, like in ETFs. So there is a lot of inflows, right? And basically purchase of XRP. But the price is still going like down. You can have like a lot of purchasing and the price goes still down because the order book is thick. And when the price goes down, as you said, there might be more people selling because they expect like lower prices eventually, maybe. So it's a dynamic thing. That's why the order book discussion is a very, very difficult one. And no one would get into, in my opinion, this. This is why Glassnode and others are not really getting into this debate topic, because it's so definitional, what it is, and is the data very clear? This is only about the total.
I mean, if we talk about the order books, we also have to talk about the DEX as well, because if we talk about the exchange order books, that's only half of the side of the story. We need to talk about the centralized exchange order books, but also on the decentralized exchange order books and the AMM, for example. And I want to say this very clearly. XRP is a coin with the utility of being liquid all the time. You want XRP to be very liquid. The moment there's a supply shock, there's not enough trading going on and liquidity going on, a lot of what we expect XRP to be used in the future, or the use cases will be in the future, cannot be really utilized the way it should be if XRP is not really available. You really want, that's why AMMs and all these single asset vaults and all these DeFi mechanics are so important, because they make XRP available, tradable. They make XRP liquid, which is exactly what all these big companies and institutions need. But they want thick order books, not thin.
100%. And let's go one further. If you look at proof of stake, right? Proof of stake really makes the native asset illiquid, without the liquid staking. But that's like introducing a third party now. Mm-hmm. But it makes it illiquid because it says you take the native token and you lock it up to validate and do like transactions. And this makes the unfortunate native token illiquid, or more illiquid. Right. It doesn't encourage liquidity for the native token. On the XRP Ledger, we want, as you say, the native token to be very liquid. We have features like auto bridging, right? Like actively doing this. It is meant to be used. It really is meant to be used. This is where XRP excels, right? Where when it's being used. And it's aimed towards people who are holding XRP, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, everybody holds XRP because XRP never be like in this status between not being like in this meta status. It's always in an account, basically. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that market makers and others who have use for XRP are actively using this XRP to provide liquidity. So the idea that it would not be used is not really... It's not really where XRP excels, right? That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, store of value is one aspect of XRP, but medium of exchange is another one. And we have to think about, do we want XRP to be a utility coin? Then you want high liquid. You want XRP to be very liquid. You want the order books to be thick. You want XRP to be used in DeFi. You want it to be used in auto bridging and pathfinding and all these mechanics that are live on XRPL. But if we want XRP to be more a store of value, then XRP should be held more passively, which I think is not the right way to go forward. If we want XRP to excel, not only in utility, but also in price, the second way of doing it, what I mean with this is actively using it and the utility of it. I think this should be more prominent in the future. This should be more in the focus than just passively holding XRP.
I fully agree. Let me see if I can share real quick. So we can see XRPSCAN, right? And this is your best tool to really see like all the data and to just at least do some quick checks if you want, okay? There's of course, Krippenreiter will put like in the links for the rich lists and all of this, the screenshots that he was beautifully showing here is, but here on XRPSCAN. So how the tracking works in general is the following. Either you have exchanges reporting their addresses, okay? Actively, they tell, hey, these are our addresses. But more often than not, you have actually community people reporting what is the the address. So how it works is let's say I'm using Coinbase, and I have a Coinbase account. I send XRP to it, okay? Or I buy XRP or whatever happens. I look and I send it out, and then I see an address, an exchange address, right, with a destination tag. So this exchange address is now an address by Coinbase that holds my XRP. Okay, so now I know this is definitely an XRP account by Coinbase, okay, because I'm using it on Coinbase. So what users are doing is then they flag this account to exchanges, to something like XRPSCAN, and they say, hey, by the way, here this is like an XRP account that is being used by said exchange. Plus, I'm pretty sure Ripple, but also XRP Forensics, back then with Thomas and so on. They have good connection to the exchanges. They know which XRP accounts are from exchanges because they need to know effectively for forensics and criminal tracking if there would be like a draining or a hack or something like that. So this is how these accounts are being tracked, and they're most likely always like to be the lower bound. Okay, means like if an exchange creates new accounts, okay, Coinbase is very famous for that. Coinbase creates like ton of XRP accounts for their operational security. I think they have over 500 accounts. Every like 20 million XRP or so, they create like a new XRP account for their own exchange. Is they not maybe immediately report that, users are not immediately seeing it, so you always are.
Is this, by the way, the reason why Coinbase has so low amount of XRP right now? Because the amount is really, really low right now. And my guess was always, I'm pretty sure at this point that a lot of Coinbase accounts are just not tracked at this point. They shifted all their accounts, maybe even for New Year's, they shifted all their accounts and all their funds.
Yes.
And now there are so many new accounts that are all not tracked and we don't know about them. But in reality, the number is probably because of this, the total XRP held in exchanges with the chart is probably even more than 16 billion, right?
Yes. That's what I said, like that's the lower bound. So when you look at these numbers, right, and let's say it's between 15 and 16 billion, this is like worst case, the lowest, and actually there might be even more, right? So you are very conservative actually with that, because for the reason, as you say, because if an exchange creates like a new account, they don't immediately report that. Plus, users are not immediately getting to acknowledge that and say, oh, this is now a new account. Let's report this to XRPSCAN and see if they can make some cross checks. So there is a time delay, and they create a lot of XRP accounts. So yeah, it might take a while until we actually get a better picture of how much they really, really hold, because they move so much. But someone who is not moving much, right, because their holders are very, very enthusiastic, XRP holders, very strong holders, are Upbit. And you can go to Upbit, you just type it into XRPSCAN to search, and you get like a whole list of accounts. They are labeled basically, and they have it says like up to 18. They might have even more, as we just discussed, right? And some of them might also not be used much. I think Upbit 1, if we click here,
there's also the difference between cold wallets and hot wallets, but for the discussion this doesn't matter at all, because it doesn't matter if it's hot wallet or warm wallet or cold wallet. All these exchanges, they hold keys to their accounts, and all these accounts have XRP, and this is what gets tracked basically.
This is very good. This is very good that you mentioned that, because the hot wallet, cold wallet argument is irrelevant. The hot wallet, cold wallet, the only difference is for this debate is irrelevant. Why? Because hot wallet, cold wallet, the only difference is how the keys are managed. That is the difference. That's how the keys are managed, not whether the XRP is readily available or not. They have their system set up so that for the user it's seamless. If a lot of people demand their XRP, in the background, they will be able to shift those XRP very quickly. We know the XRP is very fast, 3-4 seconds, right? So internally, it works super quick. There is no delay, and people can immediately, if they want, put the XRP on the market.
Right.
But here, for example, this is labeled as Upbit 1. It has only 4 million, right? 4.5 million XRP. User funds could be the hot wallet, but let's go to the other ones like Upbit 18 here, and you click on search. That's 500 million, not 4 million. That's 500 million. That's 500 million. Okay, so that's 500 million of XRP sitting here, and this is just one account. So you can go to Upbit again. This was Upbit 18. Let's go up to Upbit 17. Again, 500 million, right? You can go. You can continue doing this.
If we do this 2 more times, we are above the 1.6 billion already.
This is now Upbit 16. So we did 16, 17, 18. This is now 1.5 billion. This alone is 1.5 billion. So. Right. We clearly see the data is definitely showing something else, and Upbit as the largest XRP exchange by holdings, they have the most amount of holdings, and South Korea is a very, very strong community in XRP. They hold very strong. So yes, if you say, is this XRP coming to the market or not? Just subjectively, I would say they are very strong holders, but to the debate, this doesn't matter because they can sell whenever they want. Right. Plus, this is under Upbit's management. This is on exchange. So to the point of that people were posting, total amount on exchanges, it's just more. So yeah, and that's not bad, either. That's not bad. It's just what the data shows. It's just very neutral.
And this shifts all the time. People are withdrawing their funds and depositing their funds. So it's not a static value. It's really dynamic, and we have to observe this and have to see if these numbers are changing drastically. But most of the time they are changing, but not really drastically. And if they are changing drastically, it's probably because we are not tracking all the wallets that we should track.
Correct. Yeah, you see, this Coinbase is very notorious for that. That's nowhere near how much Coinbase has. But you see, they have a lot of dormant accounts with just a tiny bit of it, because their operational security is that they have a ton of accounts. I think they have over 500 accounts. You can see that they're tracked over 500 XRP accounts. Because each time they exceed sort of a threshold in holdings, they open a couple new XRP accounts. So what they like to do is having a ton of XRP accounts with some holdings, relatively speaking, small holdings. While Upbit seems to be very comfortable having large chunks in one account, 500 million, in one account. Coinbase would never do that. Coinbase would never have 500 million of XRP in one account sitting. They would have already created at least 100 accounts for something like that.
They're not using multi-signature, right? They're probably using multi-party computation.
Yeah, let me check.
In the settings, you should be able to see. Yeah,
no, they don't use anything.
So yeah, their operational security is on the back end.
Different. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they also don't do it. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that this account is insecure. It just means that their operational security is just more in the back end and less dependent on XRPL.
Yeah, I mean, key management is just a topic in its own, and it's very, very deep. And you can see the thing is, sure, having a multi-sig is amazing because you have multiple accounts, and so if someone tries to compromise one, they are not successful. They need to compromise a lot of accounts, keys in order to make a transaction. But on the other hand, managing multiple keys or many keys is a risk on its own. What if you lose? But then you cannot make a transaction anymore. Everything has upsides and downsides. Right. And it's just how it fits to your operations and how you're comfortable with dealing with, because that is at the end the most important, so that you can minimize your own user error, because that's where typically a lot of the source of issues is. But yeah, it was a great topic.
Yeah, it was a really great topic, but I get why people are they want some hopeful news. They want something to get inspired for higher numbers. And the sentiment is just all-time low all the time for months. I would wonder that what is there, what is out there for people to be hopeful, even though we have all these news that are half true, half false, or on the topic of Glassnode is just wrong. But maybe is there something out there for people to be hopeful for?
Yeah, so in terms of those data that we can see is that we have a lot of people, so the holdings are one thing, but the holding landscape is shifting. We're seeing a lot of ETF issuers holding now XRP. That is very great to see. That's a good way of entering. We have digital asset treasuries like Evernorth, of course, gearing up. This will be very interesting to see how well they're performing, and if there will be follow-up companies. Maybe there will be more in the future of DATs that come to the market that do very similar things. Like them. But overall, if you look at where the XRP Ledger is that more and more things we are enabling on-chain. Ripple is, from their point of view, really doing this top-down approach of bringing institutions on-chain and rolling this out. On the retail level, you see a lot of awesome use cases in terms of like the coins that they are basically doing trading platforms for. But also just in general is that it's moving in our direction because so if you just look even in the niche things, the consensus algorithm, for example, of the XRP Ledger, really, in my opinion, is starting to show very early, actually, how strong it is versus others, where they're really struggling with, like, look at Algorand, look at Solana, that they have to deal with their validators and how, if they're cost benefit or not. I think a lot of people are really, really watching right now, specifically institutions, because that's what matters to them. What matters to them is security, it's being robust, and that whatever is being built here is lasting. They want something that is lasting. You don't want to have something that is not lasting. And the XRP Ledger is showing itself from the best side, in my opinion, on all of these fronts. So it's all about positioning yourself, right? That's how I see it. And we are positioning ourselves very great. And when the time comes where there's like more liquidity in the market, this will be also reflected in XRP, okay? And of course also the XRP Ledger. So I'm just very, very bullish in what we have done on the back end, so to speak, to position ourselves, because that's at the end of the day what matters. Whether there's how much is it on the exchange or not. At the end of the day, we just want people. We just want the right people holding XRP that believe in the vision, right? Like imagine, because over time, you're going to weed out people. This is also a very great time right now, because people who are not believing in this, they're going to exit. They say, I don't think this is going to succeed anymore. Fine. Because when you sell, someone else is buying. That someone else who's buying, right? They are believing in it more than you. So over time, you will have a crowd with more conviction, and if that crowd of conviction reaches a certain point, the price will do also something, because they will not sell because their targets and their ceiling is much higher. So I see this after we had this run up, right, specifically for XRP. I see this period very, very important, because we need to clean. It sounds. Very, very, very bad. But you basically have a lot of people who need to be tested for their conviction. That's what the market demands. The market demands that there is a cleanup after something like that, and all your job is to be not cleaned up, basically. Yeah,
that's the goal.
Like CZ likes to say, I love when he posts these things. Like, what does he say? You make money by holding, not by trading, right? Long-term people who think long-term, they succeeded. And if you look in crypto in general, the top coins, it was always good to be just long-term, like a bull. Like if you bought in 2017 and you were long-term, fantastic. 18, 19, 2013, 14, it was like, it's just very clear that you just have to be.
In the sense, it's very easy. Just hold. Just do nothing. Even though doing nothing, as we discussed, is not right. This is not how it should be in the end, but for the investors, it's probably the easiest strategy, just doing nothing.
Yeah, there's like, I forgot who specific it originated from, but a lot of people, in our communities like this trading strategy, coma. Basically, you just fall in coma and just let that happen, because at the end of the day, what really matters, what really matters. Because think of this, everybody who, Gary Gensler, SEC, it was a terrible time. But if you held through, honestly, you were rewarded very, very good. Like,
that's true.
A once in a lifetime entry for a lot of people.
Yes.
And there will be always entries, and there will be also, of course, exits where people, they exit the game because they reach their moon. Everybody has their own moon, as we say.
Yeah. Talking about moon, we haven't reached it yet, I would say. We reached it on the bearable guy level, but not on the price. So there are people predicting that XRP is reaching a huge amount of dollars worth. The price is like $100 or even more, but there is no repercussions if you are wrong. So if you predict that the price is going to be very high and you are willing even to bet on this price, there's no real way to do it right now. And what I'm speaking about is the prediction market. And this is something I think will come more into play on XRPL as well in future. Maybe not even on XRPL, but the XRPL EVM sidechain maybe, or on Flare, for example, or what have you. But prediction markets will be a thing for XRP, especially in the future, because we will have people, they do it already all the time, but off-chain, based on whatever they have found out makes sense for them in terms of how they lock their funds up for a specific time where they know who won the bet or not. But with prediction markets, you could cryptographically secure these funds until a certain condition is achieved. So for example, this prediction market here, and they were tagging you on X, they are building something that they want to bring on XRPL. And this will not be the only prediction market, but you could, for example, do something like, will XRP reach $3 by January 31 this year? And then you can buy or sell based on your conviction. So let's say everyone knows that $3 is reasonable. No one is really making money if everyone is saying yes. But if you're saying no, and you are right with saying no, you'll get the lion's share of winning. And one way to do this on the XRPL especially is the smart escrow feature, which will be proposed to the validators this year, pretty early, I would say. Like the proposal will probably come Q1, Q2, I guess. We will see. It will not go live probably in Q1, Q2. I just don't see it. But we will see it probably go live maybe in Q4 this year, if all goes well. Who knows? Yeah. It's up to the validators, right? But what smart escrow will do is they will, like as you see, we see all these example use cases that Mayuka put out on her proposal. But one use case that is specifically important for the betting market, for the prediction market, is these peer-to-peer bets. So you would enable value transfer based on Oracle data, and Oracle data in this case is the price Oracle that is already live on XRPL. And it will decide based on the price that is reached and at a given time, for example. And you could configure the smart escrow to behave the way a prediction market would behave. So it will lock up funds based on value and time. If we want to enhance this in the future, we will obviously need XLS 101. It's always the same. In the end, if you want the prediction or the use cases to be even bigger, even better, I think we will end up with XLS 101, so the smart contract proposal, basically.
Yeah, I also wonder how actually that works with smart features and smart escrow, like side by side. Like you sort of have like both. Maybe is that a better way? Is it a better way to have like only smart features, or like how do they coexist essentially, right? Or if you already know that you want XLS 101, makes it more sense just to focus on XLS 101, like why proposing the other features? You know what I mean? So I'm in between. Yeah,
I think it depends on security. As a dev, you want to build your product with as minimal programmability as possible. So you go step by step. You try to do it with native features, then you realize, okay, something is missing. So you need this extra bit of programmability. So you go with smart extensions. And then you think, okay, I have this feature, for example, smart escrow, and I use the smart escrow smart extension. And then I realize maybe I also need smart tokens, and I use smart tokens. But as soon as I need XLS 101, you have to think about, does it make sense to use XLS 101 only, or does it make sense to combine all these building blocks with as minimal programmability as possible? So you get these steps. And the last step probably is if nothing works, if all what the XRPL offers, even with XLS 101, and it's still not enough, you probably want to go to the XRPL EVM sidechain or even to Ethereum, and then you want to use XLR, for example, to build the bridge or Flare or something like this.
Very good. I want to see that, because prediction markets, I think, is very, very needed. Easy to use also for our community. It is, wrote about this as well, because the thing is, on social media, a lot of people talk. There's just no way of provide or expressing your opinion that is truth seeking right now. There is a huge emphasis on basically monetizing cloud, and there's no really accountability. So if you are wrong, there's really no punishment for being wrong, and uncertainty is not reflected as well. So you can just say $1,000 XRP by next week. Trust me, I have insider information, and if you are credible enough that people would believe you that you have inside information, right? People would believe you probably. And if you're wrong, then there's really no repercussion for that at all. And there's no good way. So that is not the issue, but there's no good way of really seeing if you know insider information or not, right? That is the part. So on prediction markets, the cool thing is if you make a dumb bet, you lose. And over time, right, if you do it enough, you go broke, okay, and you lost money to the system. But on the other end, a prediction market show really probability that reflect like genuine like uncertainty. So when someone says $1,000 tomorrow, right, and you see on a prediction market, and it gives you a probability of 99% not going to happen, right? Then I know, okay, that an aggregate, even with the people who have insider information, who have maybe a lot of money to move, whatever, they say collectively as a market, 99% it's not going to happen, okay? Despite what this person says maybe on camera or on X. And that is very powerful for a lot, because it just uses basically the mechanism of a free market to give you information, right? That is basically the idea.
But it's also pretty defenseless against gaming the system. You had talked about it with ZZ, for example. Let's say you have this bet, and the bet is pretty in favor for people saying yes, and then ZZ puts something out, like he tweets something that pretty much favors saying no. You will see the prediction market go crazy, go flip on its head, and then you have all the people who were betting no make a ton of money. You will see the market shift in this direction, and maybe even back an hour later, because as it turns out, CZ, for example, was just joking, and it was just a joke, but it was instantly translated into the market, and you would see instant truth, basically based on what the open market decides could be right or wrong.
Yeah. So the big problem with prediction market in general is like not being liquid enough. And the more liquid it becomes, the more money is involved, the harder it is to basically push it around like this, because there's a lot more money involved. So in that case, if someone says yes or no, right, let's say it gives it, because that's data, that's input, right? So they say yes or no to something in that regard. The system will acknowledge that, as you say, right? Because CZ brings information, he says no, so the market thinks, okay, if CZ says no, right, what does he know? Okay, so basically, and the market tries to figure out to figure out how that works. But if CZ does it often enough, that's the cool thing with if often enough, the market will ignore him at some point. Because if he keeps doing that, at the 10th or 15th time, people say, well, he do it all the time, like it has no meaning.
And we see this with Trump as well. Like he used to, whenever he was tweeting, the volatility was gigantic in all directions. And now whenever Trump is tweeting something, it's not the same anymore. People have realized that not every statement from anyone, not just Trump, basically also all the big influencers and all the big influential people, you shouldn't always follow their lead or follow their statement very closely. Like you should really think about these statements and think about if they're reasonable or if they make sense. Like try to fight against your own cognitive bias, basically. Yeah. Just because someone is saying something and it is in favor of what you believe is right, is not what reality could be. If reality is against you, you will still be wrong.
Yeah, and it allows also people to participate and have actual subject matter expertise. So let's say you mentioned Trump. If there is like right now a rumor, let's say war with China, okay, United States war with China, okay, rumor. People are not sure. Is it going to happen? People are afraid, right? Yeah. And maybe Trump is also posting some cryptic things. With prediction markets, you can have actually like experts, maybe people even on the ground who are seeing things, right? For example, they are seeing no military equipment being moved around. Okay, if there's no military equipment being moved around, then there's no getting ready for war, right? So people can, and when people see this, they can give this input to the market by buying shares that say no war. Right, so you can get like a really good idea of people can participate with their information that they have, and they get rewarded. You get rewarded if you have good information. You get rewarded. If you are just lying, you get punished because you lose money. Essentially, that's the idea. Yeah.
So it gets complicated, and this is something you have to keep in mind. It's gambling. You have to make sure that you know what you're doing, and you have to realize if this is something you want to participate in. Just because it exists doesn't mean you should take part of it. As always with DeFi, if a new protocol comes out, it doesn't mean that you have to join right away and that you should put all your money in it. You probably shouldn't. You should probably wait a bit, but it's up to you. You have to decide if what you are doing with DeFi, what you are doing with gambling, if it's worth it or not. If it's worth it for you, if it's worth your risk management, and if you are if you convince yourself that this is something you should do, and if you convince yourself that this is something you want to do, then do it. It's your money. But if not, it's perfectly okay, as always, to do nothing.
Exactly.
There's one more topic that was spreading around, also FUD this time again, which is the
classic.
The classic Escrow Finish transaction that gets a memo attached. And on XRPSCAN, he has these disclaimers on top already, like not just for the Escrow Finish, but also for black holing accounts and so on. It already says everything you need to know, even if you have no idea about what's going on with Escrow and with why the memo is so cryptic. You can just read the label from XRPSCAN and you already realize what is going on. This escrow release was not initiated by the escrow owner, so in this case, not Ripple. Any account may submit an escrow finish transaction, so even everyone can do it, to release a completed escrow and add a custom memo. So everyone can do it, not Ripple. Even though the account says Ripple, it's not Ripple, it's a vanity address. People can create these accounts through running through the key generation. They can just generate accounts over and over again, hundreds, thousands accounts. And at some point, they find a public key that matches what they wanted to find. And this is when these kinds of accounts do these escrow finish transactions to lure in people into clicking something or believing something. Or in this case, an ironic message to the community.
Yeah. By the way, thanks for... the thing is, when you see this page, you just see the memo and so on. So the escrow note doesn't really jump into your face, at least it's into my face. So I haven't actually noticed that he put it up. Actually, the note. This is actually awesome. Thanks, shout out to you, XRPSCAN. That helps tremendously. Yeah. I mean, it's like in your face. Right. I hope maybe you can highlight that a little bit more, because a lot of people were like seeing this, and I saw like a lot of people reporting like in a live stream, even multiple news live stream. Hey, Escrow Finish released. Let's talk about it. 8 billion was sold, and jeez, that was so rough because there were people on live stream defending the memo as if it were real.
Oh no!
They were like, so they thought this is actually from Ripple, and so they were like, yeah, but it's not so bad, like they were trying to get like, yeah. I was like, no, it is not even real.
This is why it's so funny. It's satire, and if you realize it's satire, it's funny. But if you really defend these memos and messages, it's
I mean, look. So there is a very known escrow finisher. He goes, I think, escrow finisher on X even. He loves to finish escrow. He gives like shout outs to Hodor, Jungle Inc. and other people. He just loves just to give like shout outs and says like, hey, cool stuff. And so people think, I always question like, who is this? And he has like every time to come out and say, it's me, it's not Ripple, I'm a community member. It's just always so hilarious. It's always the same.
And why is this possible? It's possible because the condition is fulfilled, like the date condition is fulfilled, the escrow is unlocked, but it's not released. Like you have to actually do the escrow finish transaction to release the money that is basically in this safe deposit, in this case the escrow, to send it to the destination for which it was destined anyway.
Exactly.
If you do the escrow create transaction, you say how much money you want to put in, and you say where will it lead to, and then you configure the date condition. Yeah. And anyone like you and me and everyone, even you, the listener, everyone can do these escrow finish transactions, and you can do it with Zaman, for example, and then you can always add these memos. So you could, for example, say, "I'll follow Krippenreiter and that, and watch the Krippenreiter TV show or something in the memo," and
do that absolutely,
and people will see this. Like it's very. It should be at this point. It's important for people to understand that anyone can do it. Anyone can do an escrow finish transaction.
Exactly. I like always to visualize it the way that think of an escrow like a button with different colors. It can be red or green. So, and if the escrow is up, it is a red button. You cannot click the red button. Okay, you try to click it, it doesn't work. And as soon as the escrow has the conditions met, it becomes green, and anyone can press the button. Whoever is first to click the button, they can enter a memo, because every transaction on the XRP Ledger allows you to enter a memo. And clicking that button is also a transaction, which means you can enter a memo. That's exactly what that person did. They entered a memo while they clicked on the green button when the escrow was up. But yeah, it's awesome that XRPSCAN is putting this up. I think more people should add this to their explorers and things like that. Yeah,
definitely. And looking forward in the future, there is one prediction that I want to highlight as well.
Yeah.
So we don't always talk about FUD and all the stuff. We should also talk about stuff that is upcoming.
Yeah, we're not FUDders.
Right, we are not. And I think there is so much going on in the background, not even like in the background in a sense from a developer perspective. So for people who are not following people like the developers, you probably wasn't aware that this post was coming out, and you probably are not aware that all these things are happening in the development process for the XRPL. And we already talked about some of them in the last TV episode, but there is some that are new. For example, the privacy part. It's a heavy topic, and we will talk about this in later episodes as well, because it's very important for the institutions. Then we have programmability. We already talked about it. It's all these smart extensions, smart escrow, XLS 101, XRPL EVM sidechain, but especially all the programmability that is happening on chain. So XLS 101 and smart extension. Then we have interoperability via zero knowledge proofs. So again, privacy. It's not only privacy, it's also a way to do bridging in a trust minimized way. And then, of course, we have DeFi with the on-chain lending protocol. There will be more in the future, especially with programmability. I think we will see a lot more DeFi going on, especially with smart escrow. I'm really hopeful that this will accelerate DeFi on-chain on XRPL. And then we have obviously also the formal verification. First, we have the specification, then we have the verification with all these math equations. And then we have also modular XRPL implementations that RippleX, for example, is working on for the future of XRPL.
Yeah, I mean, huge shout out to Io, and I had him like on the space, and it's really cool to see his focus to advance the XRP Ledger. And for everybody who's listening, as you mentioned, like if you follow some of the more technical or not people, or just technical developments, and they might be very dry, and it's like it's just I'm an XRP holder. How does it relate to me, and things like that. Right. So what you have to always keep in mind is these are upcoming narratives. Okay, they are developing stories okay, at the beginning. So when you hear privacy, okay, when you hear interoperability with zero knowledge, right? Something like Interledger protocol can hide behind it, or some versions of it. So there might be something, coming in that regard.
We heard from David, for example, that a zero knowledge based approach could be something that could work for Codius. We don't know if it actually go in production or will ever be practical, but this is a way to do Codius maybe.
Exactly. That's one. And plus, we are recording this, at the same day where this is like basically the first day of David not being at Ripple anymore. Ripple is not Ripple CTO, and for the Ripple, he's not a Ripple CTO anymore. So it means there's also free time for him to explore and do things. So these are developing stories that you will see down the road get like more and more meat to the bone, right? So we will maybe see more actors that play into this, like institutions, projects, right? Actually initiatives, right, that evolve around this. Right. Maybe a collaboration with Interledger Protocol, XRP Ledger on something like this could be a thing. DeFi, on-chain lending, there might be like with all the acquisitions, right? There might be like some tighter integrations here. So when you see like on-chain lending, you can think, okay, there might be some of these acquisitions, maybe they play into this, right? So you try to puzzle things together. And it's a very important puzzle piece because very often than not, this is the beginning of a developing story. So if you want to be at the forefront, see, okay, what is upcoming, what will likely be talked about, and we will see initiatives going on. This is where Ayo was laying it down, where you put it together nicely, and I'm very excited for all of them because I cannot wait to see like privacy on chain, see like institutions appreciate that because that's a major thing. Interoperability with zero knowledge. I'm super curious to see like what's going on. Are we going to do ILP, folks? What's up? And formal specification, verification for security. People oftentimes, this is a perfect example of something in the background going to change something that is very, tangible for people. Is that with increased security, you have now way better approach to testing and way better approach to amendment voting. People often say, "Hey, when amendment voting, you want to see this." That's something that you want to see.
Yeah, and how does this translate to XRP? Especially, I think it's very clear that, especially privacy, for example, in the end, everything evolves around making XRP more useful. We want more demand. We want utilization of XRP to happen on chain. If this happens, XRP will be, for example, in case of DeFi, we will see XRP being locked. You have all these puzzle pieces that make XRP more useful. And if something is more useful, you could speculate that obviously this will lead to more demand. And there are really also like there are really blockers for institutions that are so heavy that you could argue that without these building blocks on XRPL, there will probably never be any utilization of anything. So, for example, privacy, we notice already that privacy is something, it's not optional, it's mandatory for institutions to come on chain. We know already that some form of programmability is also pretty mandatory because of compliance. You cannot solve compliance without programmability. It's not really possible because it's just too complicated. There are too many variations, just too much going on in the sense of compliance. And then you have also as you said, the formal specification and verification, which is super important for security. If I'm an institution and I have $1 trillion in the form of stablecoins on chain, I don't want to ever risk this money for an edge case that gets implemented because we go for a fork, because we enact another feature. And this feature maybe is nothing that this specific institution needs, but it's risking their funds on the ledger, not only their funds, but our funds as well. So if you want to be sure, or at least as sure as you can be, that your funds are secure and that you not lose all your money because of any edge case, this is again, mandatory. You want this to see live at some point in the future, and it will come, and then we will have the same security that we also see in, as we said in last episode, with medical services and with military grade security, for example. So this will all come.
Yeah, very nice set. Yep, 100%. The future is definitely, by the way, on the DEX, right? You can see also Coinbase now tapping into the DEX, where they on Solana, I believe it was, for tokens. So if you're listed on the DEX there, you can tap into it from Coinbase to it for liquidity. And Binance, I think they look into something like this with Aster. They have like this perp DEX. Mm-hmm. So they all want to basically aggregate more liquidity on blockchain, on DEX, so that they can tap into, because it's way better than on a centralized exchange. And I fully agree with that, and I think the XRP Ledger is perfectly positioned for that. And I want to urge people, when they also see like these metrics, it's way too early, right? In my opinion, like these numbers are amazing that you can see sometimes on other chains, but it's still too early to call any winners by any means, right? It's a slow moving thing, and until we actually see institutional adoption. We will still need to, I guess, build out the infrastructure for that, and we're getting better and better. It's a grind, but and then even if you look at what we are building out here, privacy, interoperability, zero knowledge, formal specification verification, it becomes more and more serious. Actually interesting things. Like if you believe. In 2021, 2022, it was just NFTs, right? NFTs are amazing, don't get me wrong. But if you see like something like this is like, it has more substance to what people can do in the real world.
Yeah, it's not just launching a token, selling it for extracting funds from regular people, and the space is maturing, I think.
Yeah,
and with this,
build the future of finance here, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the future. And as we see, 2026 is not going to be boring. We will see a lot of new features being enacted and proposed, and people will build new narratives, and we will see all this in conjunction with what we can expect on the XRPL. I think is a really good foundation for the future. And I hope you really learned something new today with all these new features going on. And we learned about privacy, and Vet explained to us the topic of the supply shock, and that it's not really real. And I hope to see you next time as well. And I hope you had a happy new year. Until next time. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.